welcome to Taxes and Retirement Live. I am Andy Panko, owner of Tenant Financial. Thank you for joining for another week. Let me get rid of this for you. We got an exciting one today, a super simple, super easy topic, when to start Social Security. There's nothing simple or easy or mathematical about, well, some mathematical about it, but this is one of the more complicated, difficult, multifaceted decisions, for better or worse, in retirement planning. Before we get into it, let me start with the dad jokes for the day. How do you get your phone drunk? You give it screenshots, tequila screenshots. Did you hear about the cheese factory that exploded in France? There was nothing left but debris. I worked at a French bank for like 4 years. Picked up a few words of French at the time, but otherwise my French accent is horrendous. And finally, honestly, I don't mind leg day at the gym. It's just the 2 days after that I can't stand, literally, because my legs are like jelly. Okay, one more thing quick, the disclaimer before we start. This video is only general explanations and education. It's not specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Before considering acting on anything you see in this video, first consult with your tax, legal, or investment advisor, which I am not. I'm just some random guy on Facebook giving helpful hints and education about all the delicious stuff we discuss in taxes and retirement. So, Social Security. Oh, and just looking at comments here. Okay, so quick thing about comments. Like last week, what we're going to do going forward is I will run through my stuff and save all comments to the end, because there's so many people joining, which is a great thing. So many people joining, asking great questions, that when I take the questions in line, it really sort of breaks up and kind of ruins the flow a bit. So I'm just going to run through this stuff, do questions at the end. Next week will be the first of the mailbag episodes, which is just me sitting here, nothing prepared, just ask me questions. So next week will be a free-for-all with, shoot questions, and I'll do my best to answer. It should be fun. I'm assuming I won't be able to answer everything, or at least not fully, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, but for these more sort of topic-specific ones, I will just kind of run through my bit, and then we will take questions at the end. So, all right. Social Security, I do have some slides prepared, nothing too crazy, but a few people saying my video is fuzzy. I don't know why. It's my same camera, same streaming software as always. Apologies. Hopefully you can see me well enough. I don't have an answer for that. All right, let me I'm just pulling up Facebook to see what I look like, if I can see it. No, all right, never mind. Okay. So let me get my slides here. 1 second. Share. Window, and here we go. Share. Okay. All right. Let me give some general thoughts about Social Security claiming decisions and sort of Social Security in general. Now, with all this, there is no indisputable right answer. It's good to ask for advice, for opinions, for find out what friends, family, or others are doing. But the right answer for you isn't necessarily going to be the right answer for someone else, and vice versa. And a lot of it, as much as you want to and should try to do this as logically and to some extent mathematically as possible, there is going to be some emotional and personal feeling about it. And that's, if that's how you make your decision, that's not to say you're wrong. So it's very easy to go on groups like this and other groups throughout Facebook, or anywhere for that matter, blogs, message boards, what have you, and ask, when should I start Social Security? Well, you're going to get answers all over the board, and none of them are necessarily right or wrong. So, take it for what it's worth. The other thing is, like I said, it's just so multifaceted. It's a seemingly simple and harmless question: when should I start my Social Security? But there's so many other things and considerations that need to go into it, as we'll start, as I'll discuss here. I think you'll see after this that it's not that simple of an answer, unfortunately. Now, it probably doesn't make any of you feel any better, but just, being honest, it is difficult to try to figure out what's the right decision to do. And again, there isn't necessarily a single right answer. So don't feel bad if you choose one way and, you ultimately should have, or you don't want to change your mind. The other big thing is, do not think about it like an investment. A lot of people do. They'll say, I could invest my money instead and it'll grow longer, it'll grow more. So let me take Social Security early because I can invest it and earn whatever, 6, 7, 8% per year. And then that over time will grow and produce me more than what I would have gotten from just delaying Social Security and getting larger benefits down the road. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but it's not fair and it's not an accurate comparison to treat or view Social Security as a traditional investment, because it's not. It's an annuity, or it's more. It's closest related to an annuity or longevity insurance. And what I mean by longevity insurance, longevity just means how long you're going to live. Longevity insurance means to the extent you do live really long, this will still be there. It's not going to run out. Now, put an asterisk next to that. I'll discuss at the end my views on the future of Social Security. But let's assume, it's still going to be there, or at least to some extent it'll be there. So for that reason, and this is why it's never a fair comparison to try to view traditional investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, whatever. I see my screen's a little glitchy. That happens. It should go away soon. So hopefully you're still seeing me and hearing me. An annuity at its core is nothing more. The purest form of annuity is just a pension, a basic pension. You get a stream of income for life. When you die, it stops. Maybe there's some other options for payments, but for the most part, it lasts as long as you do. You can't compare that level of certainty, of guarantee, of security to any traditional investment. Stocks may go up over the long term, maybe they won't, but along the way, they're going to do this, that, and the other. Bonds, same thing. There's zero guarantee from any traditional investment. There is an underlying, I don't want to say, I got to use my words carefully. Social Security isn't guaranteed. It can be changed at any time, but practically speaking, I think anyone on Social Security or close to it, the rug will not be pulled out from under you, or at least not in any sort of substantial way. And I'll touch on that towards the end. So anyway, so don't just get caught up in the bull of people saying, well, I can get my payments now, invest it, and do better. Yeah, maybe you can. And historically speaking, over the long term, yes, you probably can. But again, this isn't an investment. You can't compare something with a guarantee and consistency and security with a traditional investment. It's an apples to oranges thing. Another thing people often start with, especially quantitative-minded folks, is let's just make it a break even. If you start early, you're going to start getting payments at potentially 62, let's say. Now, they'll be smaller than if you delay. The longer you delay, the larger the payments will be. So the trade-off is, okay, if I delay, I'm foregoing a bunch of months or years of payments, which is bad. But the upside is you'll get more larger payments when they do start, which is good. So you kind of have to do the math and figure out, okay, at what point does delaying, make it worth the payments you give up? And I'll touch on that in a moment. The other thing to consider, going back to, you can't really treat this like anything else, especially not traditional investments, is that this is likely for many of you to be the only source of guaranteed lifetime income you have that has an inflation increase adjustment. So a lot of pensions don't. Federal pension does. Some other corporate pensions I've seen do have some sort of inflation increase mechanism, but a lot of pensions don't, if you even have a pension. Social Security does. Now, practically the amount of inflation probably won't keep up. The amount of increase in payment probably won't keep up with the actual inflation you're going to experience in your years when you're 60 plus, because things like healthcare become an increasingly large part of your budget when you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And that goes up 5% per year, let's call it, historically. The Social Security increase is keyed off of CPI, general inflation throughout the country, which isn't indicative of the higher rate of inflation that a lot of retirees will face because of things like higher, healthcare expenses. But nonetheless, you'll have some increase, some non-zero increase in most years, which is good. So keep that in mind. And finally, I already sort of touched on this, but I think everyone already knows this, so I didn't want to make this too much about Social Security basics, but the longer you delay, the larger your payment will be when you do eventually start. So in most cases, you can start your payment as early as 62 or as late as 70. And again, every month you delay, it becomes a little larger every month. Okay, so that's the basics I wanted to touch on for now. Let's start with some things to consider. So let's assume you're single, so not married, and you don't have any dependents, no minor children, no disabled children, no dependent parents, etc. It's just you. Yeah. Remember I said you can't make the decision purely a mathematical thing, purely a break even. But if you're single with no dependents, that is at least a good starting point. The math is such that if you live until your early 80s, I think it's like 83, give or take a year. If you live until 83, let's call it, it's in your benefit to delay as long as possible, i.e., delay until 70, because all those years of foregone payment build up such that the benefit is when you do eventually start, you get a larger payment. So you start at 70. So the day you turn 70, for example, if you die tomorrow, guess what? You get no payments. So you gave up potentially 8 years of payments. That's the downside. And then 71, 72, 73, and then blah, 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 up until 83. Once you hit 83-ish, again, give or take a year, I don't remember the exact number. From that point forward, it will have benefited you to have delayed up until 70, because from 83-ish onward, the cumulative amount of payments you'll get over your life will be larger than had you started earlier. Someone else saying the presentation's hazy. I don't know if this matters. I have Facebook up. Let me close the Facebook window. I don't know if this will help or hurt. Anyway, okay, so I closed my Facebook window. Hopefully this clears up the picture. Now I just have my streaming software on. I cleaned my glasses, but still blurry. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So that's at least a starting point. If you have, if you're single and you have family history of people dying in their late 60s, early 70s, and you have reason to believe you'll follow suit, unfortunately, then delaying until 70, almost certainly isn't going to be the right answer. At one extreme, if you're 63 and you get a terminal diagnosis, you may only live a year or two. Start ASAP. There's no point in delaying. I mean, maybe nothing's coming to mind immediately, but for the most part, if you're not going to live long, then start it sooner rather than later, because you're just leaving money on the table otherwise. There's one other consideration I'll touch on that may sort of impact things here, but for the most part, if you're single, starting at a break even is a good starting point, at least. Again, if you think you'll hit 83, give or take a year or more, you delaying till 70 is probably, it's a decent consideration. Again, I can't give specific advice here because there's so many inputs, but delaying can often make sense in that case. Next scenario, married persons, but no dependents. So no minor children, no disabled children, no dependent parents. It's just, you and a spouse. The big difference here between married persons and single persons is survivor benefits. Nifty little feature of Social Security, such that when one spouse dies, the surviving spouse will live on with the higher of the two payments that both spouses were getting. So super quick example. I'm kind of jumping ahead of bullet here, but let me pause that thought. Let me go and order my bullets. So with this in mind, the historically higher earning spouse, specifically, that means the one who has the larger Social Security benefit, should generally delay as long as possible, assume 70. The other spouse, the lower historically earning spouse, can start later and start earlier. There's much more flexibility, whether you start at 63, 64, 65. I don't say it doesn't matter, but what matters more is that the higher earning spouse delay as long as possible. And here's why: because of the survivor benefit. So here's an example. Let's assume the higher earning spouse delayed his or her benefit until 70. And the benefit at the time was $3,500. The lower earning spouse's benefit is only $1,000. So while they're both alive, one spouse gets $3,500 a month, the other spouse gets $1,000 a month. If and when one spouse dies, regardless which one dies and which one survives, the surviving spouse will continue getting $3,500 a month for the rest of his or her life. The smaller payment of $1,000 falls away upon the first person's death. So maximizing your benefit, if you're the higher earner and you're married, not only maximizes the benefit you'll receive while you're alive, but also maximizes the benefit your spouse will receive if you predecease your spouse. Or if your spouse goes first, you'll still get your $3,500 a month the rest of your life with inflation increases, as I mentioned before. So that's the survivor benefit thing. You're not just maximizing your own benefit for the sake of you're maximizing the context of helping out whichever one of you two outlives the other, because that person will live on with the higher payment. There's more to it than that. There's, I don't want to get too off tangent here, but people often ask, well, what if I'm delaying till 70? I'm the higher earner, I delay until 70 and I die at 68. Does that mean I get no credit for the delaying I did up until that point? No, you do, thankfully. What happens is the surviving spouse would get the benefit you would have gotten if you took your benefit, the day you died, basically. So at 68. So you'll still get your surviving spouse will still get the credit of you having delayed until 68 when you died, thankfully. So you don't lose it for delaying. There's other angles here, like if you're under your full retirement age, which I'll touch on, that can also impact how much survivor benefit you get. And there's other more complicated claiming strategies where if your spouse dies, you can claim your own benefit. You can claim just a spousal benefit, let your own benefit grow. Vice versa. You can claim just your own and do the spousal one later. I'll leave that for another topic, another day, because that's its own discussion. But point is, if you're married, you have to consider the survivor benefit aspect of Social Security, which usually means the higher earner should delay as long as possible, typically 70, if you can do that. The other thing to keep in mind with, getting a bit ahead of myself, but as a spouse, you can potentially get what's called spousal, but not survivor benefits. Survivor benefits are the benefits you get after your spouse dies. Spousal benefits are the benefits you can get off your spouse's record while your spouse is still alive. So, the lower earning spouse could get some benefit off the higher earning spouse's record while the higher earning spouse is still alive. But in order to get those spousal benefits, the other spouse needs to have actually started his or her own benefit. So that's a little monkey wrench. That may influence your decision. Well, okay, yeah, I understand waiting until 70 will maximize my benefit and the eventual survivor benefit. But what if I start earlier? That also means my spouse can then potentially start getting a spousal benefit off my record. So let me consider those benefits in conjunction with how much I may get on my own and sort of look at the whole kit and caboodle. Again, all these little rabbit holes we can go down into. I will not get too far down the specifics of the spousal claiming strategy and stuff. Just I want to drive home at this point. If you're married, you have to consider your spouse, have to consider the spousal, the survivor benefit aspects of Social Security. Okay. Interesting. So someone here commented the East Coast had reduced internet speed issues from Verizon today. Perhaps that's why there's blurriness. Could be. Yeah. Good point. Okay. Next. What if you're married or single, but this time have dependents? So as I just mentioned, Social Security may pay benefits to your spouse, off of your record. It also may pay benefits called auxiliary benefits to other persons off your record, specifically your minor children, your disabled children, or even potentially your parents if they're dependent on you. And there's various criteria you have to meet for each of these groups to qualify. For minor children, I think they need to be under 18, or if they're still in school, under 19. Disabled children could be any age, so long as they became totally and fully disabled before age 22, I think. And then dependent parents is fairly self-explanatory, but there are IRS conditions and things of what makes them dependent. But the issue is, or the point here is, again, like I said before, let's assume all else equal, you want to delay your benefit to not only maximize it while you're alive, but also maximize the survivor benefit in the case you're married. But what if you have a young, minor child at home? You have a child that's only 12, 13, 14, whatever, under 18, I think it is. Well, then if and when you start your benefit, well, guess what? That minor child can also get a benefit off your record. And multiple minor children can. There's this other angle. There's a family maximum. You get capped out. You can't have 20 kids all pulling benefits off your record. You can, but everyone's benefits will get tamped down because there is a family limit around how much in total can be paid off a number, record holders record. But where I'm going with this is another angle to consider. If you have a disabled child, if you have a minor child, if you have dependent parents, they could possibly get money off your Social Security record. So that may lean you towards possibly starting sooner rather than later, because once you start your benefit again, they can then start their benefits off your record. Versus if you delay until 70, guess what? They can't get anything off your record until you start at 70. So now you got to do this trade-off. Do I start early, reduce my own benefit, but that means my family can start getting some benefits? Or do I delay as long as possible? My family gets nothing along the way, but when I do start, my benefit will be that much higher, and then my family can start taking benefits off my record. So, another layer of complication, unfortunately. All right. Next, other considerations. What if you still plan on working? Not everyone does, but what if you do? Will you be starting your benefit before your quote unquote full retirement age, which is a term that only has relevance within the Social Security world? It has nothing to do with when you actually retire or stop working. You could work, you cannot work, whatever. That has no bearing on your full retirement age as far as the Social Security Administration is concerned. This little table here at the bottom, it just summarizes full retirement ages. They're simply just keyed off your year of birth. It's that simple. The one little hook here is that if you were born on January 1st, you look to the prior year as your year of birth. So for example, if you were born January 1st, 1960, you would not be this 1960 and later line. You'd actually be 1959 year of birth in the eyes of Social Security. Okay, so if you do start your benefit before your full retirement age, and you're working, so you have any sort of earned income, could be self-employment, consulting, side hustle, Uber driving, or traditional wages, W-2 wages from a part-time or full-time job. Depending how much you earn, that may reduce your benefit that you'd otherwise get. Again, only if you're younger than your full retirement age. So for example, and these numbers change a little bit every year. In 2021, if you are working in the years prior to the year of your full retirement age, for every, if you make more than, let's just round up and call it $19,000, if you make more than $19,000, your benefit will be reduced by $1 for every $2 you're over that limit. Another way to look at it, for every dollar you're over, they'll reduce your benefit by 50 cents. So do the math. At some point, you get completely phased out. If you're making $100,000 a year working and you're younger than your full retirement age, your benefit's going to get wiped out completely, because this earning test will just, do the math. It reduces 50 cents of every dollar over, or $1 of every $2 over, technically. Your benefit will get reduced to nothing, potentially, depending how much benefit you have. Now, all is not lost. The amount they withhold from you isn't gone forever. This is another technical rabbit hole I don't want to get too far deep into, but all the way it basically works is for each month they withhold some benefit from you, they basically tack that on so that when you do hit your full retirement age, they true it up and they basically bump out and give you some extra delayed credit. Long story short, when you do hit your full retirement age, your benefit will be slightly higher than it otherwise would have been, to try to compensate you back some for the amounts they withheld due to this, what's called earnings test. Again, so this only comes into play if you start your benefit, you're younger than your full retirement age, and you have earned income from wages or self-employment. Your benefit may be reduced. There's two numbers to look out for. If you're working in the year prior to the year of your full retirement age, you can only make $19,000 a year. Again, I'm rounding up. You can only make $19,000 a year before they start reducing it. In the year of your full retirement age, you can make up to $50,520 of earnings. Above and beyond that, then they'll reduce it $1 for every $3 you're over that, or they'll reduce it 33 cents for every dollar you're over, depending how you choose to look at it. So that's just yet another consideration. If you're done working, you have zero intentions of ever having earned income, and you're only 62, this won't come into play for you then, because again, this is only if you have earned income. But if you do plan on working, starting early may not make sense, because your benefit may get partially or fully reduced and withheld because of this earnings test. Alrighty, let me get a drink here quick. And I'm back. Another consideration. Legacy goals. What is legacy goals? Legacy is just fancy financial advisor speak for what do you want to happen to your stuff after you die? Or do you have specific goals or intentions of something happening to your stuff after you die? If one of your main goals is to leave as much money, as much assets as possible to your heirs, then maybe starting early makes sense for you so as to not spend down some of those assets while you're delaying Social Security. Start Social Security early, preserve your assets to eventually leave as much as possible to your heirs, if that's your goal. And then vice versa. If your goal is to just live happy, if you have anything left, great, your heirs will have it. If not, no harm, no foul, then this isn't a consideration. Then maybe the opposite holds true, which is maybe you should delay, as we've touched on before, based on these other considerations. And then that means you have to spend down some of your assets while you're delaying, to cover life expenses or whatever. Spend some down in those years, and then eventually start your Social Security at 70 or whatever age you choose. So in that case, spending down some of your assets may not be an issue if you don't have a legacy goal of leaving as much as possible to your heirs. What else we got here? Okay, tax planning. Since we are taxes in retirement, tax efficient retirement planning, I'd be remiss if I did not mention this, and this is a big one that many people don't really give enough consideration to. So there's more to say here than what's on the slide. So let me see if I can try to make sense of this. Social Security as a form of income is one of the more tax advantaged sources of income you can have, especially relative to pulling money out of traditional tax deferred accounts like IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, thrift savings plan. Why is that? So when you pull money out of tax deferred accounts like those, every dollar you take out is treated as ordinary income. There's no reduced capital gains tax rates. It's a dollar of taxable income, period. And as we've discussed, elsewhere in this group a lot, there's other taxes that may come into play based on how much taxable income you have, like Medicare surcharges are keyed off your other sources of gross income. Net investment income tax, another additional tax that's keyed off your income. So anyway, so pulling money out of tax deferred accounts is all traditional taxable money. Every dollar is fully taxed. Social Security at the federal level, no more than 85% of it is included in your gross taxable income, where 100% of your tax deferred withdrawals are included. No more than 85% of Social Security is included. So federally, get it pound for pound, getting more money from Social Security as opposed to tax deferred accounts means lower taxes federally. At the state level, most states, roughly 40, this number changes a little bit each year, but about 40 states flat out don't tax Social Security at all. They just simply strip it out, right? It's not even a consideration. So at the state level, and not that state income taxes are necessarily bad, especially compared to federal taxes, but still at the state level, in most states, your Social Security is not taxable at all. Whereas withdrawals, again, from traditional tax deferred accounts, maybe. Now, every state's a little different. And there's a post in the group today or yesterday how some states are fairly kind to retirees and don't tax certain retirement incomes like pensions, 401k withdrawals, whatever, or they don't tax a portion of it or whatever. So not all states have full-on tax on IRA withdrawals, but many do to some extent. Whereas Social Security, again, like 40 states, so 80% of the states roughly have no tax on Social Security, and the other 10 or so that do, some of them have these tiered things where only some of your Social Security may be taxed or at certain levels. So, even then, Social Security is still fairly tax favored, even in those states in most cases. With that in mind, this sort of further supports the notion of delaying Social Security, again, to maximize its benefit, to maximize the amounts of inflation increases you'll get on it, and to maximize the survivor benefits for whichever one of you or your spouse, if you're married, lives longer. There's also tax benefits to delaying. Here's why. So again, keep in mind what I just said so far. Social Security, compared to traditional tax deferred account withdrawals, Social Security is a much more lower taxed, more tax advantaged source of income. So typically in your 60s, especially after you stop working, your wages go away So that income you no longer have. You probably still have some dividends and interest. You may have some rental income, perhaps, possibly a pension, but for the most part, when your wages stop, you don't have a lot of taxable income. You didn't start Social Security yet. You may not have started your pension. You don't have to start taking RMDs, required distributions from your tax deferred accounts, till 72. So you have flexibility in these potentially a handful of years, better part of 10 years perhaps, where in order to help you delay Social Security, you're going to need money from somewhere. Where can you get it from? Well, pulling some money out of your tax deferred accounts in those years could make a lot of sense. Again, because you don't have a lot of other taxable income. Your $100,000, $200,000 of wages went away. That right there would have had you in the 22, 24% tax bracket, depending if you're married or single or whatever. That stopped. So now in your post-retirement years, before you start pensions or whatever, you haven't yet started Social Security because you're delaying. Now could be a good time to pull some money out of your tax deferred accounts and potentially only pay 10 or 12% federal tax on it, maybe 22. In doing so, that can provide you some money to live in those years where you didn't yet start Social Security. You are taking some money out of your tax deferred pot now while you have some control over how much taxable income you have, instead of just keep kicking that tax can down the road. So you're realizing the tax now. The payoff is you'll get higher Social Security, so that in the future, more of your income will come from Social Security, which is lower taxed, as I mentioned. I dropped a lot on you. I know it's tricky. There's a lot going on there, but there's some tax planning benefit to delaying Social Security because it gives you opportunities to pull forward, to spend down or do Roth conversions or whatever. But the point is, take some tax deferred money now, pay taxes now while you don't have a lot of other taxable income, which means you'll be in relatively low tax rates, to help you delay and build Social Security, which again is more tax favored when you do eventually start it. The other thing that helps with this notion of delay Social Security, realize some tax deferred monies now, is we are in historically low federal income tax rates under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which went into place, and most of the provisions went into place in 2018. They are scheduled to last through the end of 2025, so we still have 5 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 2026 tax rates will revert back up to what they were, which is 2 to 3%, if not slightly higher in some brackets. Tax rates will be going up in 2026, if not sooner. And we talk about this all the time. We know tax rates are going up some. That's already pre-scheduled, starting in 2026. But there's a decent chance they'll go up faster than that, and or they'll go up more than that down the road. Because if you haven't noticed, the U.S. is running a really large deficit. We were already building a juicy deficit because the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act rates, in my opinion, are too low. They're unsustainably low. They're so low that we were generating a deficit because the country wasn't taking in enough tax. So that the low tax rates alone already meant we'd have to raise taxes in the future to help make up some of the deficit. But then add to it the pandemic and multiple trillions of dollars of stimulus that were created. And I'm not making it political. Stimulus was needed. To what extent, that's debatable, but stimulus was needed. But that all means that further sort of builds this case that to try to pay some of this deficit off from that was made larger because of the stimulus, taxes are going to have to go up even more down the road. So long-winded way of saying that now for the next few years is objectively a good time to consider pulling forward some of your tax deferred monies, realizing it now, paying some tax on it, especially with the double whammy benefit of, in doing so, you can help delay your Social Security that, that'll be taxed more favorably in the future than having just to pull money out of your tax deferred accounts in the future. All right. Final comment / consideration for me. There's more than this, but this is my opinion. Take it for what it's worth, but tune out all the rhetoric and noise and cable news banter about Social Security is going to disappear. disappear, no. I'll go on record as saying I can't fathom a world or a scenario where Social Security flat out stops, dries up, and goes away. What is factually accurate is the trust fund belying Social Security was projected to deplete in 2034, 2035 before the pandemic happened. That's going to speed that depletion up. So if there's no changes made to the system, the trust fund almost certainly will deplete 2030-ish, maybe a little more. That's 10 years away. That's not very far. But, and I did a video on this, will Social Security run out of money is what it's called. The trust fund may and potentially will run out, but that doesn't mean benefits stop. Even if the trust fund runs out, there will still be enough money coming in every year through payroll taxes, through income taxes paid on Social Security, that people should still receive about 80% of their anticipated benefits for the foreseeable future. I think it's 75 years projected out. So all of us, most of us aren't going to live more than 75 years at this point. So absolute worst case, if nothing changes, there's no bolstering of the system, the trust fund will deplete in about 10 years, give or take, but your payments won't disappear. There'll be enough income coming in that you'll still get something. Now, this is my opinion, this is less factual, you're less objective, but I don't see a scenario where people who are already on Social Security or really close to it getting their benefits reduced. People like me, I'm 43. I am assuming my benefit will be lower than what the Social Security Administration is currently estimating it will be. I'm already planning on that. It's not going to go away, but I'm assuming 20-ish% reduction, let's say. And people even younger, who knows? Maybe the story is even worse if you're only in your 20s or so. But Social Security is not going. I cannot picture Social Security flat out going away. So don't buy into it. It makes for good political bashing. It makes for good heated arguments at Thanksgiving, but it's noise. It's not going away. Okay. Will it be reduced? Perhaps. Will it be taxed more? Perhaps. Remember, I said no more than 85% of Social Security is federally taxable. I would not be surprised if that goes up to 100, meaning all of your Social Security becomes fully taxable at some point. But I don't picture anyone who's currently late 50s or older having a reduction to their benefit amount. That's just my 2 cents. One other final thought I thought of is, sometimes this decision when to claim is made for you. You're 63, you get laid off, you don't have a lot of assets, investable assets saved. You flat out need money, pure and simple. You don't have other places to get it. Social Security may be your only option, right? Even though you want to delay, maybe it just might not be a possibility for you in your financial circumstances, in which case, take it when you got to take it, right? And don't let someone tell you you're wrong or that's the bad decision. You do what's right for you. Okay. So I'll leave you with that. Those are my final thoughts on when to claim Social Security. Let me get a drink here and see what kind of questions we have. It looks like others have been responding to questions already. You know what I'll do? Let me actually pull up Facebook and see if it makes more sense for me to see your comments there. For those of you that do still have comments, looks like a lot of you are actively addressing others' comments. So thank you for that. Taxes in retirement. All right, look at that. Oh, I can see me seeing me. I wonder if this will mess up my video stream because there's going to be some weird delay or something. Okay, so I don't see any fresh comments. I see someone replying to someone else. Okay, so for those of you that do have additional comments on Social Security, feel free to drop them in there. Oh, file and suspend. Yes, Canon. Oh, and you put your picture up. Cool. All right. Yeah, so we're going to get into some of these rabbit holes now, I suspect, which is completely fine. So throw whatever questions you have at me. So file and suspend, what is that? Not to be confused with filing restricted application. File and suspend means this stopped a handful of years ago. If you didn't already do it, you can't anymore. Recall I said that in order for a spouse or someone else, dependent child, disabled child, to get auxiliary benefits paid off of your record, you need to start your own benefit. Once your benefit started, then your spouse, your minor child, whomever, can start taking their benefit off your record. If you don't start your own, they can't start theirs. What file and suspend was that in order, so let's say I have a minor child and I'm old enough to start benefits myself. I can start my benefits. That then unlocks the door for my minor child to get his or her auxiliary benefits off my record. Once those start, I can then suspend my suspend my benefit, right? So I basically turn it off. I turned it on, unlock the window, the door, open the window, whatever analogy you want to use, for my child to get benefits off my record. I then suspend mine, so mine can keep growing. I can keep delaying it and start it later in life. But my child doesn't have to stop. His or her benefits will still continue, even though I suspended mine. That's file and suspend. That was a phenomenal loophole that the government took away, and rightfully so. The system is strained, and part of the reason why, because there were so many of these little things that allow people to really get a lot of money out of the system in many cases. File and suspend isn't allowed anymore. So if you didn't already do it, you can't. I don't know if that helps. It's dead in the water at this point, Kenan. Unless you're of the age where you already did it, it's too late. The ship has sailed. That's file and suspend. And just a comment about people getting benefits. So, it sounds nefarious that the government took this away. Well, frankly, the Social Security system is too generous, and that's why it's in trouble. Now, there's lots of reasons for that. I'm not pointing fingers. Part of it's just people living longer, obviously. When they started the system in 1935, the life expectancy was much shorter. So people are living longer. That's a big part of it. Plus the baby boom happened, that was after 1935, obviously. So there's this massive 10,000 people per day turning, retirement age now. That wasn't foreseen at the time Social Security was created. So anyway, the system on average, more people get more out of it than they put into it, which just simply means the system is going to run out if that trend continues. So they keep doing these little patchwork of changes. A few years ago was one of them, and they got rid of file and suspend, which didn't move the needle much in the grand scheme of the Social Security health, the health of the system. It was just enough to be annoying to people that did take advantage of it. But it was something that, I honestly sort of agree. This was a nice to have, but whatever, it's one of the low-hanging fruit for them to have gotten rid of. So good for them in that sense, but bad for people who can't do it anymore. All right, good question. David Foltz, besides Maximize My Social Security, do you have any other recommended places to explore Social Security options? So what Mr. Foltz here is referring to is there's a software called Maximize My Social Security. It's paid. It's only I think it's like $40. You get access to for the year, and you can run a limited amount of scenarios and what ifs in it. Pretty robust. I have it. I'm going to stop using it. Honestly, it's a lot less valuable now that file and suspend went away. When there were these other angles and things to look out for, software like this was really valuable because it would point out, hey, you're eligible for one of these neat, nifty angles. There's less angles now. So really, Maximize Social Security is just a glorified break-even calculator, honestly, David. So for the advisor version, it's like $230 a year. I'm going to stop having it because I don't see the value in it. But there is this for $40 a year for the retail version, and others like it. I don't personally know of others. This was the only. I looked at 2 or 3 a few years ago when I was deciding. I don't remember the other ones, honestly. But this was the one I liked at the time. But I don't see the value for 200 something bucks a year for me. So no, I don't have a great recommendation, David. Sorry. Spousal benefits are interesting in that they plateau when the spouse hits FRA. That is correct. Yes. So fun fact about spousal benefits is as the spouse getting benefits off the other spouse, the most you will get is 50%, assuming both spouses are still alive, not a death scenario, but both are still alive. The most you'll get is 50% of whatever the other spouse's full retirement age amount would have been. So let's assume full retirement age was 67. Whether the other spouse starts his or her benefit at 62 or at 70, when they start their benefit, opens the door for you to then start your spousal benefit off him or her. The most you'll get is, or what you'll get is 50% of what your spouse would get if they started at their full retirement age. Now, there's reductions for you claiming early. That's another rabbit hole. Anytime you start any form of benefit prior to your full retirement age, there will be some reduction to it, whether it's a spousal benefit or your own benefit. So that's another, interesting angle to have to account for. But yeah, good comment, whoever this was. I'm in that arena. Okay, this looks like it's a response to another question, so I will scrap that. What about bend points? Yeah, what about them? Super technical. This is the bend points are part of the inner workings of how your benefit payment is calculated. Way beyond the scope of this video. I have a video about it called "How is your Social Security primary insurance amount calculated?" That gets into bend points. So check that out. It's on my YouTube channel if you're interested, whomever this is. But I'm not sure what you mean. What about bend points? But basically, bend points are just, in calculating your benefit, they take your historical average earnings and they take the first certain amount of it, and then you get credit for I forget the number, some percentage of that, and then it bends after that amount. The next chunk of your earnings, you get another percentage of that goes towards your payment, and then it bends again at the second bend point, and then any earnings beyond that, average historical earnings, get another percentage applied. So you add up those three amounts up to the first bend point, between the first and second bend point, and after the second bend point, you add up those three amounts. That's what your estimated payment is on your Social Security statement. So I think it's 90/32, yeah, whatever. I discussed that in the video again, how, I forget what it's called, or calculating your Social Security primary insurance amount. I think that gets into bend points in painful amounts of detail if you're interested. Okay, Marianne with the picture. Cool. I plan to take Social Security at 70. My husband is 67. Will he be able to file for a portion of my Social Security payments? Yes, sort of. So he can't claim off yours until you actually start yours. So Marianne, so let's assume fast forward to 70. You start yours. Your husband can then potentially get a spousal benefit off your record. I say potentially because if his own benefit will be higher than what his spousal benefit will be, he'll simply get his own benefit. He won't be able to pick and choose whether he can get your spousal benefit or his own. Whatever's higher at the time, that's what he'll get. Now, another wrinkle. If you were born before January 2nd, 1954, then you have an option. Then you can say, nope, I want to take just the spousal benefit, let my own benefit sit untouched and continue to grow, and I'll start it later. Again, only if you were born prior to January 2nd, 1954, which your husband wasn't, unfortunately, Marianne. Only then can you pick and choose. In your husband's case, and anyone born after January 1st, 1954, it's called, quote unquote, deemed filing. Whenever you go to sign up for any benefit, you'll be deemed to be applying for all benefits available to you at the time, and you'll be given whichever's highest. Hopefully that answers your question. So maybe he can get a spousal benefit, but if his own benefit's higher than what his spousal will be, no, he'll simply get his own benefit, Marianne. Good question. Okay, let's see. Where'd it go? Like the comments all just jumped down a bunch. Judy Contreras. If divorced, you can apply for the spousal benefit at age 62, even if your ex-spouse has not filed. But yes, yeah, great point, Judy. So I didn't mention divorce spousal benefits at all, actually. That's a great comment. So most of what I discussed today, for married folks, applies for the most part just the same if you're divorced, so long as your marriage lasted at least 10 years. What Judy's mentioning here is that, like I said before, you can't get spousal benefits unless the other spouse has already started his or her benefit. That's true for folks that are still married. In the case where you're divorced, you're married at least 10 years. That's the magic number to be eligible for divorced benefits. So the marriage lasted at least 10 years. If you're married at least 10 years, and you were divorced more than 2 years ago, you do not need to wait for your ex-spouse to start his or her benefit in order for you to start a spousal benefit off his or her record, thankfully. Now, the rules I mentioned before about the 1954 birth date, those still come into play. So if you were born after January 1st, 1954, you can't pick and choose taking the ex-spousal benefit or your own. When you go to sign up, you'll simply get the highest of whatever's available to you at the time. But yes, that is a good point. And they did that so divorced spouses can't be spiteful to one another. So like the spouse who is the higher earner, he or she can't delay claiming their benefit just to stick it to the other spouse and prevent the other spouse from getting a spousal benefit. So again, if you were divorced at least 2 years, you can start a spousal without your ex having actually started his or her own. Good. Oh, yes. Okay, Jackie. So Jackie just asked about divorced spouse. Yes, I touched on that. There's more to it than that. Now, important thing to know is that when you do get benefits off an ex-spouse's record, it has no bearing on the ex-spouse. It doesn't reduce their benefits at all. If your ex gets remarried and his or her new spouse can get benefits off your ex's record, it doesn't impact their ability to get those benefits, completely unrelated. So whatever you do or don't take off your ex-spouse's record does not impact your ex at all, for better or worse. In some cases, you might hope it did, just to screw them a little bit, but it doesn't. Okay, so I touched on the rules a little bit. Have to marry 10 years. Planning tip. If you're married 9.5 years and you're calling your marriage, it's done, stick it out for 6 months. Hit the 10 years if you can. Do what you have to do. Move out, whatever. Stay legally married, though, to all extents possible, to make sure you get to 10 years. Right now, if you're a year into your marriage and it's not working, don't stick it out 9 years just for this. But if you're 9+ years into your marriage, you may want to, on paper, stay married till at least the 10th year, until you complete 10 years, so you're eligible for these divorce spousal benefits. Okay. Just seeing here. Here's a good one. Okay, so I'm not sure if someone commented on this. So what is a restricted application? So this is what I started mentioning, or what I mentioned before. If you were a restricted application, simply means when you file for a benefit, you restrict it to just one benefit or the other benefit or whatever. So the example I gave was spousal benefits. If you were born prior to January 2nd, 1954, you can still potentially file a restricted application such that when your spouse starts his or her benefit, you can then sign up for just the spousal benefit or just your own benefit, vice versa. You have to be over your full retirement age to do it. That's yet another wrinkle. So this window is slowly closing. There's not many people who are, born before 1954 and over full retirement age and not yet 70. There's a few more years left that people can do this, and that window closes. But anyway, so that's restricted. You're saying, I want just this benefit, don't touch the other one. Where you can also do a restricted application, regardless of your age, the 1954 thing doesn't matter, is in the case of survivor benefits. So your spouse dies, you can file a restricted application to restrict your benefit to just taking survivor benefits off your deceased spouse, and let your own benefits sit untouched so it can still grow and get those delayed credits over time. And then at some point, if and when that's higher than the survivor benefit, you can then flip over. When you're 70, let's say, you then stop taking the survivor benefit and switch over to taking your own benefit, which is potentially higher at the time. That's a restricted application. Again, in the case of death, you can still do that. You don't have to be born before a certain age. But in the case of taking spousal benefits off a living spouse, you do need to be born before January 2nd, 1954, in order to file to do this restricted application trick. Oh, here's a good one. If you start Social Security and you change your mind a few months later, can you stop it and restart it? Yes, there are two potential options. One is everyone has the ability to completely undo their benefit within 12 months of when you first started. So let's say you lose your job at 63. Your knee-jerk reaction is, I need some money. Let me start Social Security. So you do. 6 months later, your employer comes back like, we're sorry, we love you. Can you come work for us for even more money than you were making before? You say, okay, great. But now you got the Social Security check you don't really need. You wish you can delay it to start it later and let it grow. If you do it within 12 months of when you first started, you can hit the nuclear undo option. You can make it like it never happened. Now you have to pay back every penny of benefit you received up until then, and any auxiliary benefits that were paid to your spouse, child, parents off your record. Those all need to get paid back. You literally make it like it never happened. You can do that within 12 months. And then you simply just sit and wait and let your benefit continue to grow until 70 or whenever, and then take it at the time. That's one option. The other option is if you miss that 12-month window, or you don't have the funds to pay back all the money they paid you, you can wait until your full retirement age. Any point after your full retirement age, you can suspend your benefit. Now, suspending is different than undoing it, like I just discussed. Suspending is literally, yes, I acknowledge I received my benefits all the way up until this date. Suspend it, stop paying me any money now, and you'll continue getting these delayed credits from that point forward, so that when you do eventually restart it, your payment will be a bit higher, and then you just, you unsuspend at that point, and your benefit starts again. So that's the other option. That's the second option to kind of undo, or at least pause your benefit if you want to. Good comment. Good question. Brenda, if you are collecting Social Security based on your own benefit, your spouse then files, and the spousal benefit is higher than your own, yes, you can go up to the higher amount. But okay, so it looks like you're responding to someone else. Sorry. Okay, cool. Whoever this was, thank you. Yeah, okay. Someone talking about restricted application, file and suspend. Okay, let me actually start at the bottom now and work up. If you do a restricted application, when the person turns 70 and was taking ex-spouse benefits, will the SSA switch to that person's own benefit, or do they stop the ex-spouse and wait for you to file? I don't know. I wouldn't give the Social Security Administration the benefit of the doubt. I would assume they don't automatically give you the higher. So take it upon yourself to switch. I do know firsthand of a couple people who did this and did consciously reach out a few months before 70 and said, hey, just want to let you know, I want to switch effective, when I turn 70, and everything worked out fine. I wouldn't wait and hope Social Security does it automatically. Maybe they will, I don't know, but I wouldn't want to find out the hard way. So good question. I don't know, but I wouldn't leave it to chance. I wouldn't leave it to hope, unfortunately. Okay, here's a good point. So David Foltz, good idea to set up your Social Security online so nobody else can try filing in your name. Yeah. There's actually 3 really good reasons. Great point, Dave. So everyone listening, here's a public service announcement. If you haven't already, set up your My SSA account on the Social Security, SSA.gov website. I did it years ago, in my 30s. 3 good reasons. First reason, I'll save David's for the last because I don't want to steal his thunder. He already put it out there. First reason is to make sure your earnings history is correct. So when you set up a profile, you can view a PDF version of your actual Social Security statement, the one that used to come out every year on your birthday that they cut back dramatically sending. Now it's only once every 10 years, maybe, something thereabouts. It's always changing. But it's that statement in PDF form. And on that statement, it has your entire earnings history, every year of earnings for you reported to the Social Security Administration. So like in my case, it has when I was, I think 16 was my first not under the table job. Working at a supermarket, it shows the $700 I made that year. It's cool to see. But in addition to being cool to see, your earnings history is what goes into your benefit calculation. If to the extent you have any missing years or years that are erroneously lower than they should be, you want to try to get those corrected. So without pulling up and having access to and pulling up your statement, you don't know what numbers are in there. You want to spot check it, make sure they all look right. Now, how do you get it corrected? If it's 20 years ago, unless you have your W-2 still, or your tax return, your pay stubs, or your employer still around and they have those records, it's frankly going to be hard to get the Social Security Administration to fix it without proof. But if it's like a recent year, you're going to have that info, or at least your employer is. So you can go to the SSA and say, hey, you messed up my earnings history. Here's the accurate info. So anyway, that's one, to confirm your earnings history is correct. The second one simply is just to see your benefit, so you can plan around it, get an idea what your benefit is. There's some good information on there. Here's your estimate if you start at 62, if you start at 66, if you start at 70. Here's what your spouse can get, if you were to die or if you're alive, whatever. So that's two. You can see the estimate. And three is for fraud prevention. So by you setting up your account, you're preventing someone else from doing it as you fraudulently. Even if you're, like me, 40 something, I'm not taking Social Security for 20 plus years. I still have an account now because I don't want someone else claiming they're me at some point and going in there and trying to file for a benefit fraudulently. So open up an account if you haven't already. Everyone, get yourself an online My SSA account. Great comment, David Faltz. Thank you. Okay, here's a good one. What section of a W-2 should match earnings history at SSA.gov? Easy answer. There's a box on a W-2 called Social Security earnings. I want to say it's box 3. Box 1 is your taxable wages. Box 2 is federal tax withheld, I think. Box 3 is what's reported to the Social Security Administration. Oh, look at that. Yeah, nailed it. Whoever this is, thank you. Box 3. So, what am I trying to say? You only pay Social Security tax on up to a certain amount of earned income each year. Above and beyond that, you don't pay. So for 2021, it's just shy of $140,000. So whether you make $140,000 or $10 million, you only pay tax, Social Security tax, on up to that $140,000 number. So in looking at your W-2, if you have 200 grand of gross wages, your box 1 is going to say 200,000-ish. Box 3 will say, I think it's $139,600 thereabouts. That'll be it. That'll be your Social Security wages. So that's what you want to look for and tick and tie to your Social Security record. Here's a good question. Do your Social Security earnings only look at after the age of 18? I don't think so. No. So long as you paid Social Security tax, which could be any age that you legally have reported wages, I think that counts, Jackie. So I would assume it started at 16. If you did actually have payroll taxes, aka Social Security taxes, withheld against whatever your earnings were when you were 16. My first job was working at a hot dog truck by the waterfront near me, making $4 an hour under the table. I was in 6th grade, so I was what? I was 12 maybe, I guess. Yeah, sounds right, 12. Looking back now, I can't believe that was cool at the time. So it was an elderly fellow. He owned a hot dog truck. He would drive it down to this waterfront, driver's seat up front. The back is all the hot dogs and the whatever. He would drive it down to the waterfront. I'd show up for my 4 or 5 hour shift. He would leave. He'd go home and take a nap for a few hours, leave me, a 12-year-old kid, by myself in a vehicle, first of all. But not only a vehicle, but a vehicle that has open flames. It had those burners because there's these big tubs of hot water. They're making hot dogs. It had a microwave. It had knives. He had a gas generator to power the stuff while the car part was turned off. And I was working a cash register. So anyway, great money for a 12-year-old under the table. But looking back now, I can't imagine that a 12-year-old kid was allowed, or my parents allowed it for that matter. But built character, I guess. Anyway, so those weren't reported because that's not going to be in my record. I'm not sure where I'm going with that. Okay. Yeah, so under the table wages aren't going to get reported. It's only wages on which you paid Social Security taxes. That should be on your earnings history, regardless of age. I don't think there's a minimum. All right, looks like that may be it. I'm just looking at the bottom most comments here. Oh, here's a good one. I love this one. Okay, so not to get political, but is the trust fund in trouble because Congress had borrowed from it? No, categorically. Hold on. Yes, Congress had borrowed from it. Let me explain what I mean. Congress has not raided it. They have not taken money from it. That's all gibberish. 100% false. They've never taken money out that they didn't put back. Here's what I mean. So yes, they've borrowed from it. Now, by law, the way the Social Security program is legally structured, all of the money in the trust fund needs to be invested in interest-bearing bonds issued by the U.S. Treasury. Now, bonds issued by the U.S. Treasury is nothing more than the government borrowing money to do whatever, for general revenues, to go build infrastructure. I don't know, whatever, whatever the government uses money for. In that sense, yes, literally every penny in the trust fund is taken out and borrowed by the government to do with as it pleases. But they're all backed by IOUs, and IOUs that pay interest. The government borrowings have never been defaulted upon. Every cent that's been taken out has been put back with interest. And that interest is not an insignificant amount of money in the trust fund. So in that sense, it's actually good, in my opinion, that the trust fund is required to be invested in these interest-bearing securities backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, because that's additional revenue coming into the Social Security system. Now, it's the government taking from one hand, putting into the other, but nonetheless, all of the money in the Social Security system is earmarked solely to be used for Social Security. It's borrowed, yes, but always put back with interest. So it's actually a revenue generator. The fact that the government borrows, it generates revenue. The reporting, the accounting of the Social Security Trust Fund is second to none. There's every year that the trustees of the Social Security Administration put out a monstrously large report detailing every single fact and figure you want to know. It's all open to the public. Anyone who claims that's bull, the government takes money, doesn't put it back, false. Do the homework, do the research. Don't make dumb allegations. Read the report. I get worked up about this because I'm a big fan of Social Security, and I don't like when people rip on it for the sake of making political trash talking. So yes, the government borrows money. They borrow every single cent out of the trust fund, but it's paid back with interest. Never been defaulted upon, and I don't foresee it getting defaulted upon. Now, again, that's my opinion, but so no, the system is in no way it's no worse off because of the government borrowing. It's the opposite. It's actually better because the government borrowed, because for all the borrowings, there's additional interest revenue that gets paid into the system. So had the government not borrowed and the cash just sat there, the system would be worse off, actually. So anyway, so hopefully that answers your question, but no, the borrowing from the trust fund in no way has put the system in jeopardy or made it any worse than it otherwise would have been. And it was never rated. It was never taken from by the greasy, dirty politicians. That is categorically false. All right, rant over. Great comment, though. Thank you. So whoever that was. Okay, here's another one. So yes, to the extent the money is borrowed, it's invested in treasuries. But what if it weren't invested in treasuries? What would one expect them to do with it? Is there a safer investment than treasury securities? Whoever this is, I don't know if this is rhetorical or this is a legit question, but no, there's not safer investments than treasury securities. Had it been invested in equities, historically speaking, yes, it would have done better. But once you start investing the Social Security system in something that can lose value, especially things like equities, that's not going to go over well, right? And rightfully so. Long term, yes, it should do well, equities, but what if it doesn't? Like the Japanese stock market, for example. I'm not saying the US is Japan, but the Japanese stock market hit a peak in 1989, I think. It has not yet reached that peak. It had a huge crash after the late 80s, hasn't gotten back to it yet. What's that? 40 years later, 30-something years later, it still has not rebounded. So stocks do not always go up, right? Which is why you want to be diversified, not just one country, not just one sector, whatever. Anyway, so no, I don't feel there's better alternatives that would have still produced some sort of interest and have no risk of principal loss. Treasuries are the only thing that would do that. Once you start investing in stocks or other bonds, you now open up the idea that the money could drop in value. And I guarantee you, a lot of the population will be really angry. And so that I don't foresee that happening. Good question. Yep. Okay, just looking here. Here we go. Good question. So looking at my Social Security statement, that includes 2020 income. Yep. I have 2 years of zero income back in the early 80s. It's quite common. People stayed home or out of the workforce or whatever. Are those 0 years averaged in, or is it just my last 35? No, it's your highest 35. It's not the most recent. Now, I have a video, again, check out my other video on YouTube, how to calculate your Social Security primary insurance amount. It's your 35, what's called indexed years. So for example, in 1980, maybe you made 30 grand and that was big stuff at the time, but there's been lots of inflation since, right? Maybe 30 grand in 1980 is in present day dollar equivalent to 100 grand. I'm just making that up. So, you can't just compare 30 grand versus 100 grand to average them out. No, the benefit calculation process takes that 30 grand you made in 1980, adjust it for inflation. Let's assume that's now worth $102,000. So it's going to take $102,000 as your 1980 value. And then every historical year up until the year you turn 60, it does this inflation adjustment. So once it adjusts all of your historical earnings, it then takes the average, it then takes the highest 35 of those and averages those. So if you have, let's assume you have 37 years of earnings, 2 of which are zero. Well, those 2 zeros are thrown out because you have 35 other non-zero years that will be factored into your benefit. Those 0 years don't matter. If you have less than 35 years of total earnings, then yes, zeros matter. And unfortunately, you will get zeros in your average of your 35 years, and that's going to mean slightly lower payment, all else equal. Okay. Looks like we're almost done here. Teresa Wood. Yeah. If you retire at 65 and delay until 70, will your Social Security benefit at age 70 roughly match what your 65 statement said, or does it assume you worked until 70 at those wages? Yeah, it depends. So when you look at your statement will tell you if you take it at 62. So let's assume you're 50. If you take it at 62, here's what it's estimated it'll be. If you take it at 67, here's your estimate. If you take it at 70, here's your estimate. Yes, those years, 62, 67, 70, assume you keep making the wages you made in the most recently reported year. So if you made 100 grand last year, those estimates will assume you keep working up until those years and you keep making 100 grand every year up until those years. If you stopped working 2 years ago, so your last year was zero, the assumption it won't matter at that point because it's going to assume you keep making zero every year going forward. So then it doesn't matter. Here's where it gets tricky is that let's assume you already have 35 years of maximum earnings. So you made a few hundred grand a year, you capped out, you hit that 130, 140 grand of earnings limit for Social Security. So you already have 35 maximum years. Your assumption is going to assume you keep earning at that maximum level, but it's probably not going to matter much because you already have 35 of the highest possible years. So even if it does assume you keep working, it may not move the needle much on your benefit estimate, whether you take it at 67 or 70, because again, you already have 35 maximum years in your record. So yeah, great question, but it's not that simple to answer, unfortunately. But generally speaking, yes, it does assume you work up until the year of 62, 67, or 70. The other thing it doesn't do is it doesn't take into account inflation increases. Like I said, there are annual inflation adjustments with Social Security. So the benefit, let's assume you're 50, the benefit it shows you at 67 is assuming there's no additional inflation adjustments. Even if all else equal, that benefit will ultimately be higher by the time you start it because there will be some non-zero amounts of inflation increases along the way, for what it's worth. Oh, here's a good one. Is it true that people who turned 60 in 2020 have their primary insurance amount reduced because the wage index was lower because of the effect of COVID? Yes, unfortunately. I have a video on that on my YouTube channel called aptly titled something along the lines of, "Will my benefit be reduced if I was born in 1960?" As of now, yes, it's possible legislation will change to plug this hole or fix this problem, if you will. Long story short, definitely check out the video. I explain it all there in glorious detail and graphs and explanations. But the gist of the story is, remember I said before that all of your historical earnings are indexed or inflation adjusted up to the year you turn 60. And then earnings from 60 onward are no longer inflation adjusted when they go into your determining your benefit amount. And the problem is, the way they do this inflation indexing is they look at the year you turn 60. So if you're born in 1960, that's 2020, unfortunately, and I'll explain why. They look at the national average wage index of the year you turn 60 and compare it to the national average wage index of all years prior. And so the difference in those indexes from the prior year to the year you turn 60 is the inflation factor they apply to that year's historical earnings. Now, because of the pandemic and because the national average wage index dropped, I don't know the amount. I don't know if it's decided yet because 2020's just recently ended. But it was widely believed months ago that there would be a substantial enough reduction in I think it was like 5 to 10% reduction in the national average wage index, perhaps, if I remember correctly. So unfortunately, everyone born in 1960 is going to get skunked, versus if you were born 1 year later or 1 year prior, so either 1959 or 1961, your benefit is going to be higher than if you were born in 1960, simply because you got a bad bounce. The pandemic happened in the year you turned 60, and that coincidentally is the year that they look at the national average wage index and compare it to historical years. I think in my video, I estimated that it could be up to a 5-ish% reduction in benefits for the unfortunate coincidence of being born in 1960 versus 59 or 61. Again, I don't know if this will get resolved. If it doesn't, there will be some decrease to people born in 1960. I don't know by how much. If they do resolve it, then maybe they'll backstop and you won't get some reduction. Now, I don't know if there's any. I know it's been discussed, it's been kicked around. I don't know how serious the traction is, if any, to actually address it and fix it. But yes, it is factually accurate that if you were born in 1960, your benefit will be reduced somewhat than what it would have been had you been born a year sooner or later. Not cool, but it's the way the formula works, unfortunately. It wasn't intended that it was kind of built that there would be this logical sort of natural steady increase in national average wages over the years. It didn't anticipate there being, pandemic and the world kind of lots of the world economically ceasing for a year. Okay. All right, looks like that might be it. What else do we got here? Last comment / question, Teresa Wood. So that growth of 8% per year by weighting is only true for those who work between FRA and 70. No, it has nothing to do with working or not working. It's simply, so the quote unquote full retirement age, as I mentioned in the beginning, has no bearing in the real world. It's purely a Social Security metric figure. Your PIA, or primary insurance amount, is nothing more than it's the base amount of benefit they use for you, and it's the amount of benefit you'd get if you start your benefit at your full retirement age, which for most people watching is probably 67, maybe slightly younger. Anywhere between 66 and 67, let's call it. So if you start your benefit at your full retirement age, it's going to be your primary insurance amount. That's your base number, if you will. It's a starting point. If you start it later, whether you're working or not, doesn't matter. If you delay and start it after your full retirement age, your benefit will increase by 0.2% for every month you delay. To think about it more easily, 0.2% per month is 8% per year. So for every year you delay, your benefit will increase 8% from what your full retirement age amount would be. technically 2/3% per month, but let's just call it 8% per year. So you get that growth regardless. Whether you're working or not doesn't matter. Simply delaying the start of your benefit beyond your full retirement age gets you an additional 8% per year in benefit. When you do eventually start your benefit grows by 8% for every year you delay, I should say. Starting earlier than your full retirement age amount, than your primary insurance amount, reduces your benefit from what it would be at your full retirement age. And that's this two-tiered thing. The first 3 years prior to your full retirement age, it is reduced by 6 and 2/3% per year for each year earlier that you start it. So if you start 3 years early, it's reduced 20%. That's the easier math. I just do that way. So starting 3 years earlier than your full retirement age, your benefits reduced 20% from what otherwise would be. Each additional year earlier is reduced another 5%. So if your full retirement age is 67 and you start at 62, that's 5 years, your benefit will be reduced 30% from what it would otherwise would be if you started at your full retirement age. And then if you delay beyond full retirement age, it'll be 24% higher. So from 67 till 70 is when you delay, that's 3 years. It'll be 24% higher than what your full retirement age amount would be. Sorry, lots of numbers don't go over well on a screen where I'm just flashing fingers and doing hands. This is better to see in tables and stuff like that. But I'm just trying to explain, you don't lose the growth by not working. You get that 8% simply for waiting, delay. Okay. All right. I'll stop there. Looks like questions are done. Thank you all. Next week, super excited again. That's the free for all. Just pepper me with questions, the mailbag episode. If you have questions you definitely want addressed, feel free to send them to me ahead of time so I can make sure, I'll give those priority. Otherwise, just fire them at me next week. Could be anything, personal, professional, tax efficient retirement planning, whatever. Curious to see how that goes. So that's it. I will see you next week. Have a good night.